My parents, with the unwavering certainty that only they could possess, told me to pack my things and sleep in the garage of the mansion they lived in. It was a cold, detached command, delivered over dinner as if they were asking me to pass the salt. That night, as the chill of the concrete floor seeped into my bones, they discovered a devastating secret. The mansion was mine, and I had been paying for their entire lives without them ever knowing. If you're watching this right now, and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Before I tell you about the night that changed everything, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family secrets and the staggering power of truth. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 32 years old. To my family, I was the quiet, artistic daughter, the one who pursued a hobby instead of a real career. They pictured me as a starving artist, sketching away in a dusty corner, barely scraping by. The truth was, I am an architect. Not just any architect, but the founder and principal designer of Vance Designs, a firm that specializes in minimalist, sustainable luxury homes. I was successful. More successful than I had ever let them know. You see, in my family, there was only one star, and it wasn't me. It was my younger brother, Ethan. From the moment he was born, Ethan was the golden child. He was charming, outgoing, and had a knack for convincing my parents that every one of his half-baked ideas was the next big thing. I got straight A's. Ethan got a trophy for participation in his bowling league, and guess which one was displayed on the mantelpiece? I won a prestigious university scholarship for my architectural designs. My parents left the awards ceremony early to make it to Ethan's amateur comedy night at a local bar. The pattern was set early and cemented in stone. Our parents, Richard and Mary, were not malicious people, but they were blinded by their adoration for their son. They saw his failures as temporary setbacks and his mediocrity as untapped potential. My successes, on the other hand, were treated as quiet flukes, pleasant but ultimately insignificant compared to the grand destiny they envisioned for Ethan. He wanted to be a financial advisor, a title he gave himself after watching a few YouTube videos on cryptocurrency. My parents poured thousands of dollars into his ventures, which inevitably crashed and burned, leaving them with less savings for their own retirement. After I graduated and my career quietly took off, I saw the financial strain they were under. They had downsized to a small condo and were living frugally. I couldn't bear to see them struggle. At the same time, I knew that revealing my success would only invite jealousy from Ethan and pressure from my parents to fund his next failure. So I created a story. I told them a distant great-aunt I'd barely known had passed away and left me a modest but steady trust fund. It was a lie, but it felt like a necessary one. It became the perfect cover, allowing me to help them without upending the delicate, if dysfunctional, family hierarchy. "Eleanor, honey, the property taxes are due," my mother would say with a sigh, and I would write a check from a separate account, funded by my firm's profits. "It's a good thing you have your aunt's money to fall back on." Ethan's car broke down again, my father would tell me, his voice laced with worry. "The repairs are going to be over $1,000. I would transfer the money to my father's account, and he would tell Ethan it came from his pension fund. They believed they were living on their own means, with occasional help from my little inheritance. They had no idea that for the past 5 years, I had been funding their entire lifestyle. The biggest lie of all was the house. 3 years ago, I designed and built my dream home, a sprawling, 5-bedroom modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a serene lake. It was the culmination of everything I had worked for. When it was finished, I made my parents an offer. "The trust has a real estate investment property," I told them. "The beneficiary, that's me, is allowed to have family live in it, as long as they maintain it. It's too big for me. Why don't you move in? It would be a way for me to help without just giving you cash." They were overjoyed. They saw it as another stroke of luck, a blessing bestowed upon them. I moved into one of the smaller guest suites, content to live in a corner of the masterpiece I had created, just to give them the comfort they deserved. I set up my architectural studio in a large, sunlit room on the 2nd floor, and from there, I ran my business, designing homes for clients across the country. My parents would occasionally pop their heads in. "Still working on your little drawings, honey?" my mother would ask. a patronizing but fond smile on her face. They thought my work was a quaint hobby, a way to pass the time while my trust fund paid the bills. They never once asked about the complex models, the blueprints, or the constant stream of couriers delivering material samples and contracts. The inequity was a constant, dull ache in my life. I remember one Christmas vividly. I had spent weeks finding the perfect gift for my father. A rare first edition book by his favorite author that cost me a small fortune. Ethan gave him a generic tie he'd clearly bought at the airport. My father thanked me politely for the book, placing it on a side table, but he wore the tie for the rest of the day, boasting to everyone about Ethan's impeccable taste. Another time, my parents needed $10,000 for a new roof on their old condo before they moved into the mansion. I gave it to them, telling them it was a larger than usual disbursement from the trust. 2 weeks later, I discovered they had given the entire sum to Ethan for a hot stock tip. The stock, predictably, became worthless within a month. When I gently questioned them about it, my father became defensive. Ethan is trying to build a future, Eleanor. He has to take risks. You're lucky you don't have to worry about those things. I was the family's secret benefactor, their safety net, and their invisible daughter all at once. I paid the bills, solved the crises, and offered quiet support, all while being treated like a dependent child living on a dead relative's charity. I told myself it was worth it to see them happy and secure. I convinced myself that their ignorance was a form of protection for our fragile family peace. I had no idea that my carefully constructed world was about to be shattered by the very people I was trying to protect. The storm was coming, and I was standing right in its path, completely unprepared for the devastation it would bring. The tranquil facade of our lives cracked on a Tuesday evening in early spring. We were sitting in the expansive dining room, a room I had designed with a 20-foot-long oak table to encourage family gatherings. My mother had made her standard meatloaf, and my father was recounting a story about his golf game. I was half listening, my mind on a difficult structural problem for a new client's coastal home. It was then that Ethan, who had joined us for his weekly free meal, cleared his throat with an air of dramatic importance. "So, I have some news," he announced, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Tiffany and I are moving in." A fork clattered onto my plate. Tiffany was Ethan's girlfriend of 6 months, a woman whose primary personality trait seemed to be a profound sense of entitlement. My parents, however, looked up with delight. "Oh, Ethan, that's wonderful!" my mother exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "But I thought you loved your apartment?" Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "Landlord sold the building. We got a 30-day notice. It's a nightmare out there, the rental market is insane." I knew, of course, that this was a lie. A quick search later that night would confirm my suspicion. He had been evicted for failing to pay rent for 3 consecutive months. But in that moment, I could only watch as the trap was sprung. "Well, of course you'll stay here," my father boomed, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "There's more than enough space. This is a family home, after all." He said it with such authority, such ownership, as if he had laid every brick himself. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked from my father's beaming face to my mother's excited expression. They were already rearranging the house in their minds, carving out a space for their precious son and his girlfriend. No one looked at me. No one asked for my opinion. My presence in the room, in the house that I owned, was utterly irrelevant. My initial reaction was a silent, suffocating panic. This house was my sanctuary. My studio in particular was the heart of my creative world. It was a meticulously organized space where my ideas took form, where multi-million-dollar projects were born. The thought of Ethan and Tiffany, with their chaotic energy and lack of respect for personal space, invading this sanctuary sent a wave of nausea through me. I tried to voice a gentle objection. "It might be a little crowded," I started, my voice barely a whisper. "My work. The studio is filled with sensitive materials and client models." My mother cut me off with a patronizing smile. "Oh, Eleanor, don't be silly. We can make room. Family helps family. It will be fun. Like a big sleepover." A sleepover. That's what she called the complete upheaval of my life and work. Ethan caught my eye across the table and gave me a look that was pure triumph. He knew he had won. He always won. He saw my quiet, creative life not as a success to be respected, but as a void to be filled with his own needs. The next few days were a blur of activity. My parents went into overdrive, preparing for the arrival of the golden child. They cleared out the largest guest suite, the one with a private balcony and a walk-in closet for Ethan and Tiffany. My mother spent an entire day shopping for new high-thread count sheets and fluffy towels, expenses I knew would indirectly land on my credit card statement disguised as household goods. My father, who hadn't lifted a finger to help me assemble the complex shelving for my studio, spent a weekend putting together a new king-sized bed frame for them. Their excitement was palpable, a stark contrast to the quiet dread that had settled over me. I retreated to my studio, trying to lose myself in my work, but the peace was gone. The sound of my parents' cheerful planning sessions drifted up the stairs, a constant reminder of the impending invasion. I felt like a ghost in my own home, my needs and my profession completely invisible to them. I considered, for a fleeting moment, telling them the truth. I imagined standing before them, laying the deed on the table, and watching their faces as their world turned upside down. But I couldn't do it. The lie had been told for so long, and it had been told from a place of love, however misguided. I had wanted to give them a life free from financial worry. How could I now use the truth as a weapon? I felt trapped by my own generosity. The day Ethan and Tiffany moved in, the house was filled with a loud, intrusive energy. Tiffany immediately began critiquing my design choices. "This minimalist thing is so cold," she announced, running a manicured finger over a custom-made concrete countertop. "It needs some color, maybe some glittery throw pillows." Ethan, meanwhile, made a beeline for the media room, commandeering the high-end entertainment system I had installed for client presentations. The soft classical music I usually played was replaced by the deafening sounds of video games and action movies. My parents followed them around, beaming, catering to their every whim. It was as if royalty had arrived. As I stood in the hallway, watching Ethan track muddy footprints across the polished white oak floors I had so carefully chosen, a single sobering thought crystallized in my mind. This was no longer just an injustice. This was an occupation. I had naively thought I could contain the damage, but I was beginning to realize that the storm had only just made landfall. The worst was yet to come. The first week of their cohabitation was a study in passive aggression and boundary dissolution. The big sleepover my mother had cheerfully predicted felt more like a hostile takeover, and I was the occupied territory. The small annoyances began immediately, piling up one on top of the other until they formed a mountain of resentment. The first casualty was my work. My studio, once a haven of focused creativity, became a thoroughfare. Tiffany would wander in without knocking, holding her phone to her ear while loudly discussing celebrity gossip, completely oblivious to the fact that I was on a conference call with a high-profile client. "Oh, sorry," she'd say with a dismissive shrug. "Didn't realize you were busy with your little hobby." Ethan was worse. He saw my state-of-the-art workstation, with its powerful processors and multiple high-resolution monitors, a setup that cost more than his car as the ultimate gaming rig. I'd come into my studio in the morning to find my design software minimized and a game lobby open on the screen, the faint smell of his late-night snacks hanging in the air. My meticulous filing system for blueprints was disturbed, and once I found a sticky soda ring on a set of final drawings for a 7-figure project. Then came the incidents in the kitchen. I am a passionate cook. I find solace in preparing complex, beautiful meals. This, too, became a point of contention. Tiffany, whose culinary skills were limited to microwaving frozen dinners, would watch me cook with a critical eye. "All that effort for a meal that's gone in 15 minutes, she'd comment. "I just don't get it." My parents, eager to validate her, would chime in. "Tiffany is so practical, Eleanor," my mother said one evening, as Tiffany proudly served a dish of lumpy gray macaroni and cheese from a box. "You could learn a thing or two from her." They would then pick at the coq au vin I had spent 3 hours preparing, complaining it was too rich or too foreign. The ultimate insult was when I found an almost full container of my homemade bouillabaisse, a dish that requires hours of labor and expensive ingredients like saffron and fresh seafood, dumped in the trash because Ethan needed to make room in the fridge for his beer. The financial drain, which I had long managed in secret, became more overt. Ethan seemed to operate under the assumption that the house ran on magic. He would leave lights on in every room, adjust the thermostat to a tropical 78 degrees in the middle of winter, and take hour-long showers that depleted the entire hot water tank. Each of these actions translated directly into higher utility bills that I, and I alone, was paying. He also began to treat me like a personal ATM again, but with more audacity than before. "Hey, Elle," he'd say casually in front of our parents. "Can you spot me 100? I'll pay you back on Friday." He knew I couldn't refuse without revealing the lie of my modest trust fund and shattering my parents' blissful ignorance. The disregard for my profession was perhaps the most painful part. One afternoon, I was preparing for a crucial meeting. A potential client, a tech billionaire who could elevate my firm to a new level, was coming to the house for a tour and a presentation. The house itself was my greatest portfolio piece. I spent the entire morning ensuring every detail was perfect. As I was setting up my presentation in the living room, my mother walked in, a worried frown on her face. "Eleanor, could you please clear out all this clutter?" she asked, gesturing towards my beautifully rendered architectural models and presentation boards. "Ethan is having a friend over to watch the game, and we want the house to look tidy." I stared at her, speechless. "Mom, this isn't clutter. This is for a client meeting, a very important one. It's worth millions of dollars to my firm." She waved her hand dismissively, the same gesture she used for a fly or an unpleasant smell. "Don't be dramatic. It's just your drawings. Can't you just do it in your room? Ethan's social life is important too. He needs to network." The sheer absurdity of the statement that a football game was more important than a multi-million-dollar business opportunity left me breathless. I tried to reason with her, to explain the significance of the meeting, the culmination of months of work. I attempted to talk to my father, hoping he would understand the business implications. He just patted me on the shoulder. "Your mother is right, sweetie. Family harmony comes first. We can't have Ethan feeling like a guest in his own home." His own home. The words echoed in my ears. I managed to salvage the meeting by quickly moving my presentation to my studio, but the incident left me shaken. The disrespect was so profound, so deeply ingrained, that they couldn't even see it. They were living in a reality I had created for them. And in that reality, I was nothing more than a background character. That weekend, my best friend Chloe, a sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer, came to visit. She had been my rock since university and was one of the few people who knew the full truth about my career and my family arrangement. She witnessed the dynamic firsthand for less than an hour before pulling me aside. We were in the garden, the only place I could find a moment of peace. Tiffany was inside, complaining loudly that the Wi-Fi signal wasn't strong enough for her to stream her show by the pool. Ethan was instructing my father on the correct way to trim the hedges I had professionally landscaped. Chloe fixed me with a piercing gaze. "Elle, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice devoid of judgment, but full of concern. "This isn't a family living situation. This is a hostile occupation. They are not treating you like a daughter or a homeowner. They're treating you like a doormat with a bank account." "I know," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "But what can I do? If I tell them the truth, it will destroy them." "Destroy them? Or force them to finally grow up," she countered. "Look at this place. You built this. Every window, every floorboard, is a testament to your talent and hard work, and you're letting them make you feel like an intruder in your own masterpiece. This isn't just unhealthy, Eleanor. It's self-destructive. How long are you going to let them dim your light just so your brother can feel like he's shining?" Her words struck a chord deep within me. She was right. I had been so focused on protecting their feelings, on maintaining a manufactured peace, that I had completely sacrificed my own. Hearing it from an outsider, from someone whose judgment I trusted implicitly, validated the turmoil I had been feeling. My anger and frustration weren't an overreaction. They were a rational response to an intolerable situation. I thanked Chloe for her honesty, a new resolve hardening within me. I knew a confrontation was inevitable. I had thought I could endure it for a little longer, for the sake of a quiet life. But I had no idea just how soon that confrontation would be forced upon me, or how cruel the catalyst would be. The breaking point didn't arrive with a dramatic explosion. but with a quiet, chillingly casual conversation. It happened 2 weeks after Chloe's visit, a period during which the atmosphere in the house had grown even more oppressive. My successful client meeting had, paradoxically, made things worse. The tech billionaire had been so impressed that he not only hired my firm but also mentioned my brilliant design in a prominent magazine interview. A small local paper picked up the story, running a feature on the mysterious architectural gem on the lake. They didn't name me, respecting my request for privacy, but the attention made my family uneasy. It was a flicker of a reality that didn't align with their narrative of me as the quiet, dependent artist. The final straw came on a Wednesday night. I had just returned home, exhausted after a grueling 14-hour day finalizing a deadline. The house was quiet, and I was looking forward to a hot bath and a few hours of peace. I found them all gathered in the living room. My parents, Ethan and Tiffany, arranged on the sofas like a tribunal. They had an air of solemnity that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Eleanor, come in. We need to talk to you," my father said, his tone grave. I remained standing, my handbag still slung over my shoulder. "What's wrong?" "We've been discussing the living arrangements," my mother began, carefully avoiding my eyes. "And we've realized that the current setup just isn't working long-term." A flicker of hope ignited within me. Were they finally going to ask Ethan and Tiffany to find their own place? "Ethan and Tiffany need more space," my mother continued, extinguishing that hope in an instant. "They're thinking about their future, about starting a family. They need a proper master suite, a space to call their own." I looked over at my bedroom door, the one leading to the suite I had designed for myself, with its spa-like ensuite bathroom and private terrace overlooking the lake. I knew exactly where this was going. "And your room, Eleanor," my father said, picking up the thread. "It's the largest. It makes the most sense for them to have it. It has the best view, and the large bathroom would be perfect for when a baby comes along." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity. They weren't just taking over the common areas anymore. They were now claiming my personal sanctuary, the one space in the entire house that was unequivocally mine. "And where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Ethan was the one who answered, a smug, careless shrug in his voice. "We figured you could move your stuff into the garage." The garage. The word hung in the air, cold and metallic. The spacious 3-car garage was where I kept my car, some gardening tools, and storage bins. It was an unfinished space of concrete and drywall, with no heating, no plumbing, and a single, bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's actually really big. You could put a cot out there, maybe a little space heater, and it would give you some privacy for your art stuff. It's a win-win, really. A win-win." They were kicking me out of my bedroom, the heart of my home, and relegating me to an unheated concrete box, and they were framing it as a favor. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just about the physical space. It was a statement. It was a clear, unambiguous declaration of my worth in their eyes. I was less important than a hypothetical future baby. My comfort and safety were secondary to my brother's convenience. I was not a member of the family. I was an obstacle to be moved. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. The years of quiet resentment, the swallowed insults, the forced smiles, they all burned away, leaving behind a core of cold, clear certainty. The lie I had maintained for 5 years, the lie meant to protect them and provide for them, had become my prison. By hiding my strength, I had allowed them to believe I was weak. By shouldering their burdens in secret, I had enabled their worst, most selfish impulses. I looked at their faces one by one. My father's stern, righteous expression, my mother's look of anxious appeasement, Tiffany's smug satisfaction, and Ethan's lazy, entitled smirk. They weren't family, not in any way that mattered. Family didn't do this. Family didn't treat one of their own like refused to be swept into a corner. My awakening was not a fiery explosion of anger. It was a moment of absolute, chilling clarity. I saw the path forward, not as a messy, emotional confrontation, but as a clinical, necessary procedure. An excision, the cancerous part of my life, had to be cut away, cleanly and completely. I gave a small, slow nod. The reaction they had expected was tears or protests, an emotional outburst they could dismiss as me being oversensitive. They were not prepared for my quiet acquiescence. "Okay," I said. The single word dropped into the silent room like a stone. They stared at me, confused by my lack of resistance. "Okay?" my father repeated, frowning. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice steady. "You're right. Ethan and Tiffany should have the master suite. I'll start moving my things to the garage tonight." A wave of relief washed over their faces. They had won. It had been that easy. My mother even smiled, a genuine smile of a crisis averted. "Oh, good, honey. I knew you'd understand. It's for the best. We're all a family, and we have to make sacrifices." "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze. "Sacrifices." As I turned and walked towards my bedroom, leaving them to their victory, they couldn't see the look in my eyes. They couldn't hear the thoughts racing through my mind. They thought they were sending me to the garage. They had no idea they had just handed me the keys to my own freedom. The performance was over. The curtain was about to rise on a new act, one they had not written and could never have anticipated. I didn't go to the garage. Not yet. I walked into my bedroom, my beautiful, spacious, light-filled bedroom, and closed the door. The soft click of the latch sounding like a gavel falling on my old life. The anger I felt was so pure and cold it was almost calming. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of a screaming match. It was the focused, precise anger of a surgeon before the first incision. For years, I had wielded my success like a secret shield, using it to protect my parents from financial hardship while deflecting any real scrutiny from myself. Now, I was going to turn that shield into a sword. My Vorkey-Beamert wasn't a hidden document or a long-lost letter. It was the simple, undeniable truth, backed by a mountain of irrefutable proof that had been hiding in plain sight all along. My secret was my entire life, my company, my accomplishments, my name. While they saw Eleanor Vance, the dependent niece living on a dead aunt's charity, the world of architecture and finance knew Vance, the powerhouse behind one of the fastest-growing design firms in the country. I sat down not at my dressing table, but at the sleek, custom-built desk in the corner of the room. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dim light. The plan began to form, not out of a desire for revenge, but out of a primal need for justice and self-preservation. This would not be an emotional outburst. It would be a systematic dismantling of the false reality they inhabited. My first call was not to my best friend Chloe to vent, but to my lawyer, Arthur Davies. Arthur was a shrewd, silver-haired man in his late 60s who handled all my firm's contracts. He knew my family's situation, having drafted the legal framework that allowed me to purchase and manage the property while maintaining my anonymity from them. He answered on the second ring, his voice sharp and alert even at this late hour. "Arthur, it's Eleanor," I said, my voice low and steady. "It's time. They've crossed a line there's no coming back from." I quickly explained the garage incident. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard him sigh, a sound of weary resignation. "I was afraid this day would come, Eleanor," he said. "They have mistaken your kindness for weakness for far too long. What do you want to do?" "I want to execute the contingency plan we discussed when I first purchased the property," I stated. "The full transfer of all financial and legal responsibilities. I want to dissolve the illusion. That is a significant step," he warned. "It will have permanent consequences for your relationship with them." "Their actions tonight already have," I replied. "The relationship they think we have doesn't exist. It's time they see the real one." We spent the next hour on the phone, mapping out the strategy. The plan was simple in its concept but devastating in its execution. First, Arthur would prepare a comprehensive portfolio. It would contain the deed to the house, clearly stating my name, Eleanor Vance, as the sole owner. It would include the property tax records for the past 3 years, all paid from my corporate bank account. It would contain the utility bills, electricity, gas, water, internet, all under my name and paid by me. It would also include a detailed financial summary, prepared by my accountant, showing the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had personally spent on the house's construction, furnishing, and maintenance, as well as the numerous loans and gifts provided to Ethan and my parents. The second part of the plan was the confrontation itself. Arthur advised against a one-on-one meeting. "This needs to be formal, undeniable," he said. "I will be there as your legal counsel. We will present it not as a family squabble, but as a legal and financial notification." After hanging up with Arthur, my next call was to my financial manager, a pragmatic woman named Isabella. I instructed her to begin the process of disentangling my finances from my parents. "Cancel the automatic transfers to my father's account, Isabella," I said. "And please draft a notification to be sent to the utility companies, informing them of a change in billing responsibility, effective in 48 hours. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. For the rest of the night, I didn't pack a single box to move to the garage. Instead, I gathered my ammunition. I printed out my firm's latest profit and loss statement. I found the magazine article that praised my design work. I even found my old university awards, gathering dust in a box in my closet. I was building a case not just to prove that I owned the house, but to prove that I was not the person they thought I was. I was not a failure. I was not a dependent. I was the architect of their entire world, and they had just tried to banish me to the basement of my own creation. As the sun began to rise, I felt a profound sense of calm. The fear and hurt had been replaced by a steely resolve. I walked over to the large window and looked out at the lake, the water shimmering in the early morning light. This was my view. This was my home. I had earned it through years of sleepless nights, relentless hard work, and unwavering dedication to my craft. I had shared it freely, out of love and a sense of duty. Now, I was going to claim it back. I spent the next day going through the motions. I moved a single cot and an old lamp into the garage, a piece of theater to maintain the illusion just a little longer. My mother saw me and gave me a sympathetic smile. "It's only temporary, dear," she said. "Thank you for being so understanding." I simply nodded, the irony so thick it was almost suffocating. They had no idea that Arthur had already messengered a formal letter to the house, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Richard Vance. The letter requested their mandatory presence at a family meeting the following evening to discuss urgent matters pertaining to their residency at the property. They assumed it was from the trust that supposedly owned the house. I could hear them whispering nervously in the kitchen, worried the trust might be selling the property. Their fear was misplaced. The house wasn't being sold. It was being reclaimed. They thought they were holding all the cards, but they didn't even know what game they were playing. The following evening, the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. My parents, dressed more formally than usual, were visibly nervous about the impending meeting with the trust representative. Ethan and Tiffany, however, were blissfully oblivious. They had already started moving some of my decorative items out of the master suite, discussing where they would put their new television. They saw the meeting as a mere formality, a bureaucratic hurdle before they could officially claim their prize. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Arthur Davies standing on the porch, his leather briefcase in hand, his expression impeccably neutral. I led him into the grand living room, the room with the vaulted ceilings and the panoramic view of the lake, a room designed to inspire awe. My parents stood up respectfully. Ethan and Tiffany barely looked up from their phones. "Richard, Mary, this is Arthur Davies," I said, my voice clear and steady. "He is the legal representative I mentioned." "Mr. Davies," my father said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming. We were a bit concerned by the formal tone of your letter." Arthur shook his hand briefly. "I assure you, Richard, the formality is necessary. Please, everyone, have a seat." We all sat, my parents and me on one sofa, Ethan and Tiffany on the opposite one, and Arthur taking a single armchair at the head, placing his briefcase on the coffee table with a soft, definitive click. "As my letter stated," Arthur began, his voice commanding the room's attention, "we are here tonight to discuss the terms of your residency in this home. There have been some misunderstandings that need to be clarified." My mother leaned forward, her expression anxious. "The trust isn't selling the house, is it? We love it here. We've been taking such good care of it." No, Mary. The property is not for sale, Arthur replied smoothly. The issue is not one of maintenance, but one of ownership and financial responsibility. He opened his briefcase and took out a thick, bound portfolio. Let's start with the basics. Who do you believe owns this house? My father answered confidently. Well, a family trust, we were told. One established by a distant relative of Eleanor's. We live here as caretakers, essentially. Arthur nodded slowly. I see. And who pays for the substantial costs associated with this property? The mortgage was paid in full upon completion, but the annual property taxes are over $50,000. The utilities, the insurance, the landscaping. It amounts to a significant sum. The trust covers all of that, Ethan interjected with a scoff, finally looking up from his phone. That's the whole point of a trust, isn't it? Indeed, Arthur said, his eyes twinkling for a moment before he turned deadly serious. And who is the sole trustee and beneficiary of this trust? My parents looked at me. Eleanor is, my mother said. It was her great-aunt's. Here it was. The turning point. I took a deep breath. That's the first misunderstanding, I said, speaking for the first time. There is no great-aunt. There is no trust fund. I made it up. The silence in the room was absolute. My parents stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. What are you talking about, Eleanor? My father demanded. The money. For the roof. For Ethan's car. It was my money, I said simply. From my job. From my career. Ethan let out a short, derisive laugh. Your career? Your little drawing hobby? You can barely afford your own car. We all know the trust pays for everything. This was the moment Arthur chose to slide the portfolio across the coffee table. He opened it to the first page. It was a copy of the deed to the property. Please, read the name of the owner, Arthur instructed. My father picked it up, his hands trembling slightly. He squinted at the paper. His face went pale. He passed it to my mother, who gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It says, Eleanor Vance, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That's impossible, Ethan shouted, snatching the paper. He stared at it, his face turning a blotchy red. This is fake. This is some kind of sick joke. I assure you it is very real, Arthur said calmly, turning the page. This next document is the final construction invoice for this home, totaling $3.2 million, paid in full by a corporate account belonging to Vance Designs. He then turned the page again. And this is the certificate of incorporation for Vance Designs, listing Miss Eleanor Vance as the sole proprietor and CEO. He continued, page by page, laying out the undeniable, documented truth. The tax records in my name, the utility bills in my name, the bank statements showing every single expense, from the groceries they ate to the gasoline in the car Ethan borrowed from me, all paid from my earnings. He then produced a copy of the magazine article with a picture of the house, the mysterious architectural gem, as the article calls it. It was designed by the acclaimed and famously private architect known in the industry as E. Vance. He paused, letting the pieces click into place. Eleanor Vance. The color had completely drained from my parents' faces. My mother looked as if she might faint. My father just sat there, his mouth slightly agape, staring at me as if he had never seen me before. Tiffany was looking back and forth between Ethan and me, her expression of smug superiority crumbling into one of dawning horror as she realized the financial paradise she thought she'd moved into was a mirage. Ethan was the only one still fighting. I don't believe it, he stammered. You couldn't have. You're just, you. Yes, I said, finally meeting his gaze. I am. I'm the person who paid for your failed business ventures. I'm the person who paid for your vacations to Cancun that you told Mom and Dad were business trips. I'm the person who has been quietly cleaning up your messes and funding your life for the last 5 years, all while you and your parents dismissed my work as a little hobby. I stood up, my voice no longer quiet, but filled with a strength I didn't know I possessed. Last night, you told me to sleep in the garage. My garage. In my house. You decided that my brother, the man who has contributed nothing, Deserved my bedroom, my sanctuary. You made it perfectly clear where I stand in this family. Now, let me make it clear where you stand. I turned to my parents. The financial support ends now. As of tomorrow morning, all utility and household bills will be transferred to your names. You will be responsible for the $50,000 annual tax bill. You will be responsible for everything. Then, I turned to Ethan and Tiffany. You wanted my bedroom? Fine, you can have it. The rent is $5,000 a month, payable in advance. The first payment is due tomorrow. If you can't pay, you have 48 hours to vacate the premises. My mother finally found her voice. A pleading, tearful whisper. Eleanor, please. We didn't know. How could we afford this? That is the question, isn't it? I replied, my voice cold. For 5 years, I made sure you never had to ask it. I gave you comfort. I gave you security. And in return, you gave me disrespect and relegated me to the garage. You didn't just take my money for granted. You took me for granted. The free ride is over. I looked at the four of them, their faces a tableau of shock, shame, and terror. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely annihilated. They had built their world on a foundation of lies they didn't even know existed, and I had just pulled the cornerstone out from under them. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was chaos. The stunned silence shattered into a cacophony of denial, anger, and panicked accusations. You lied to us! My father roared, finally finding his footing. He stood up, his face flushed with a mixture of shame and fury. For years, you let us believe. You made us look like fools. I let you believe a story so that you could live without financial worry, I countered, my voice cutting through his anger. I lied to protect you. But you're right. I made you look like fools by allowing you to treat your benefactor like a servant. My mistake. Ethan, predictably, resorted to insults. So this was all some sick power trip for you, wasn't it? Watching us, laughing at us behind our backs while you played the poor little artist. There was no laughter, Ethan, I said, the exhaustion of the long deception finally settling on me. There was just a daughter trying to take care of her parents and her brother, hoping that one day they might see her for who she was, not who they wanted her to be. Tiffany was the first to crack. She turned on Ethan, her voice a shrill shriek. You told me your sister was a charity case. You told me this house belonged to your family. You brought me into this mess. She grabbed her purse and stormed towards the door. I'm not staying here. This is insane. She was out the door moments later, slamming it so hard a piece of artwork on the wall trembled. Ethan, abandoned and exposed, looked utterly defeated. The bravado and charm he had always used as armor were gone, leaving behind a scared, insecure man-child. Without another word, he turned and trudged up the stairs to the room that was no longer his. I heard his door close, and then the sound of drawers being yanked open. That left just my parents and me in the vast, silent living room. My mother was openly weeping now. Quiet, helpless sobs. My father stood by the window, his back to me, his shoulders slumped. The entire foundation of his world, his role as the patriarch and provider, had been a fiction. We will be out by the weekend, he said, his voice gravelly, without turning around. That's probably for the best, I replied softly. There was nothing more to say. The truth had been laid bare, and it had scoured us all raw. They left the room without looking at me. For the next hour, I sat alone on the sofa, listening to the sounds of my family dismantling their lives from my house. The angry thuds of boxes from Ethan's room. The quieter, more sorrowful movements from my parents' suite. By midnight, they were gone. Ethan left in his sports car, a car I now realized I had paid for, not even saying goodbye. My parents departed in their sedan, my mother giving me one last, tear-streaked look of utter bewilderment before she got in. And then, silence. The silence was absolute profound. It was the first time in months the house had been truly quiet, free from the noise of Ethan's video games or my parents' television. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. It felt different, bigger. It felt like mine again. I went up to my studio first. The stray coffee cup Ethan had left was gone. My blueprints were exactly where I had left them. I ran my hand over the smooth surface of my drafting table. This was my sanctuary, and I had reclaimed it. Then I walked down the hall to the master suite. The door was ajar. They had taken their clothes and personal items, but the new sheets my mother had bought were still on the bed. A wave of sadness washed over me. Not for them, but for the family I had always wished we could be. I stripped the bed, bundling the expensive sheets into a pile. I would donate them tomorrow. That night, I didn't sleep in the garage. I slept in the center of my own king-sized bed, in my own room, in my own house. I didn't cry. I felt a strange and powerful sense of peace, the kind of peace that comes after a devastating storm has passed, leaving behind a clean, clear sky. The air was different. I could breathe again. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I made coffee in my pristine kitchen and drank it on my private terrace, watching the sun dance on the lake. There was no one to critique my choice of artisanal coffee beans, no one to leave a dirty dish in the sink. There was just me. The new dawn was quiet, but it was not lonely. It was filled with possibility. I spent the day rearranging the house, not just putting my things back, but truly inhabiting the space. I moved my favorite armchair to the best spot by the window. I turned the music up, filling the halls with the soaring notes of a cello concerto. I was setting new rules, new boundaries, starting with my own environment. Later that afternoon, I received a text from my mother. "We are at a motel. Your father is not speaking. I don't know what to do." I looked at the message for a long time. The old Eleanor would have rushed to their side, found them a comfortable apartment, and started paying the bills again. The new Eleanor typed a different response. "I'm sorry, this is difficult. There are resources available for finding affordable senior housing. I can send you some links if you'd like." I hit send, my hand steady. It wasn't cruel. It was a boundary. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where my well-being was no longer the price of their comfort. My new life had begun, and for the first time, I felt truly at home. 1 year can feel like a lifetime. The Eleanor who stood on her terrace a year after the confrontation was a different woman from the one who had quietly endured years of disrespect. The transformation had been gradual, built day by day, boundary by boundary. My professional life had flourished in the newfound peace of my home. Without the constant stress and distractions, my creativity soared. Vance Designs landed 2 major international contracts, and our work was featured in Architectural Digest, this time with my face and name prominently displayed. The article called me a visionary in sustainable design. The anonymity I had once used as a shield was no longer necessary. I had nothing to hide. The quiet confidence I now exuded in client meetings translated into bigger, more ambitious projects. The firm doubled in size, and I hired a talented team that shared my passion. My little hobby had become a small empire built on glass, steel, and an unwavering belief in my own vision. The house, once a source of tension, had become a true home. It was no longer just a showcase of my design skills, but a living, breathing space filled with warmth and joy. I hosted dinner parties for my friends, the long oak table now surrounded by laughter and intelligent conversation instead of simmering resentment. Chloe was a regular fixture, often staying for weekends. We'd sit by the fireplace, drinking wine and celebrating the life I had built, a life she had encouraged me to claim. I even started dating again a landscape architect named Julian who, when he first toured the house, looked at me with genuine admiration and said, "You didn't just build a house, you created a symphony." For the first time, I was with someone who saw and celebrated my strength rather than being intimidated by it. The fate of my family was a more complex story, a testament to the fact that justice isn't always about punishment, but about consequences. The immediate aftermath had been brutal for them. Faced with the staggering cost of living in the modern world without their secret subsidy, they were forced to confront a reality they had avoided for decades. My parents couldn't afford the upkeep on the mansion, of course. I made the decision to sell it. It felt too large, too full of ghosts for just me. I gave them the entirety of the proceeds from the sale, a final act of daughterly duty, but one made on my terms. It was a substantial sum, enough for them to live comfortably if they were careful. The act of selling the house was a final, symbolic severing. They took the money and moved to a small, respectable retirement community in Florida, 1,000 miles away. The distance, both physical and emotional, had been necessary for healing. The financial shock had forced them into counseling, a step they would never have taken otherwise. My mother, in our stilted monthly phone calls, began to slowly, painfully, acknowledge her role in the family dynamic. "I think I was so desperate for Ethan to be a success," she admitted one day, her voice thick with emotion, "that I refused to see the success that was right in front of me. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I truly am." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. Our relationship was being rebuilt, cautiously, on a new foundation of honesty. My father struggled more. The collapse of his patriarchal identity had been a devastating blow. He remained distant, speaking to me only in polite, brief sentences. He was a man adrift, stripped of the illusions that had propped up his ego. I continued to hope that, in time, he would find his way back, not to the man he pretended to be, but to the father I had always hoped he could be. And then there was Ethan. The consequences for him had been the most direct and, arguably, the most just. Without my financial safety net, his house of cards collapsed with breathtaking speed. Tiffany left him for good. His advisory business was exposed as a sham, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. The last I heard, from a cousin, was that he was working an entry-level job at a rental car agency. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by the harsh humility of a life lived without a cheat code. He never contacted me, and I never reached out. Our chapter was closed. The silence between us was a boundary I had no intention of ever crossing. I had established new rules for my life. My generosity was no longer a secret, nor was it unconditional. I started a scholarship fund at my alma mater for promising female architecture students from low-income backgrounds, a public structured way of giving back. My relationship with my mother was governed by mutual respect. If a conversation veered into guilt-tripping or old patterns, I would gently but firmly end it. "I'm not going to discuss that, Mom. Let's talk about something else." I was teaching her, and myself, how to have a healthy relationship. One evening, Julian and I were walking by the lake as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The new house I was designing for us was smaller, cozier, nestled in a wooded plot a few miles away. It was a home designed for a partnership, not for hiding. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked, gesturing back towards the magnificent glass structure that was my first masterpiece. I thought about it for a moment. "I'm proud of what I built," I said. "But a home is more than a design. It's the life you live inside it. I don't miss the silence, the invisibility. I'm happy now." And I realized with a sudden clarity that I truly was. The greatest justice wasn't in their downfall, but in my rise. I hadn't just reclaimed a house. I had reclaimed my life, my identity, and my future. The mansion of my past had been beautiful, but the life I was building now, on a foundation of truth and self-respect, was infinitely more valuable. As I stood there, looking at the silhouette of the home that had taught me so much, I realized the most profound lesson wasn't about architecture or money. It was about the danger of a quiet sacrifice. For years, I believed that by hiding my success, by making myself smaller, I was preserving peace. I thought my generosity was an act of love, a silent gift that would keep my family stable and happy. What I didn't understand was that a gift given in secret, at the cost of your own identity, isn't a gift at all. It's a poison. It poisoned my family by allowing them to live in a fantasy, shielded from the consequences of their choices and their biases. It prevented them from growing, from adapting, from facing the truth about their own lives and their children. My father never had to confront his favoritism. My mother never had to question her enabling. And my brother never had to face his own failures. My secret support wasn't a safety net. It was a cage that kept them trapped in their worst selves. More importantly, it poisoned me. By dimming my own light, I was implicitly agreeing with their assessment of me. I was accepting the narrative that I was secondary, that my accomplishments were less valuable, that my needs were an inconvenience. Every check I wrote in secret, every time I bit my tongue when my work was dismissed, I was betraying myself. The decision to tell me to sleep in the garage wasn't the first act of disrespect. It was simply the last. It was the inevitable conclusion of a dynamic I had allowed to fester for years. The greatest lesson I learned was this: your worth is not a negotiation. It is not something that should be hidden or downplayed to make others feel more comfortable. True family, the kind that nurtures and sustains you, doesn't ask you to shrink. They make space for you to grow. They celebrate your light. They don't ask you to put it under a bushel. I had spent years trying to earn the love and respect of people who were incapable of giving it, at least not in the way I deserved. I had to learn to give that respect to myself first. Building boundaries wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate act of self-love. It was me, finally saying, I am here. I matter. And my home, both literally and figuratively, is not a space you can disrespect. My journey wasn't about punishing them. It was about liberating myself. And in a strange way, it liberated them too. It forced them out of their toxic comfort zone and into the harsh light of reality, where real growth, however painful, could finally begin. We may never be the close-knit family I once dreamed of, but the relationship I have now with my mother, built on honesty and clear boundaries, is healthier and more real than anything we had before. Life, much like architecture, is about building on a solid foundation. For years, I was building a beautiful structure on a flawed, hidden base of lies and self-denial. It was only when it all came crashing down that I had the chance to clear the rubble and build again, this time on the bedrock of truth. So, I want to ask you all, have you ever felt the need to hide a part of yourself, your success, your ambition, your true feelings to keep the peace with your loved ones? What did that cost you? Share your stories and your wisdom in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your experiences create a community where we can all learn and feel a little less alone. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own space in the world, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more true stories about overcoming life's greatest challenges. Don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear that their light is worth shining brightly. Thank you for listening. And remember, designing a life you love is the most important project you will ever undertake. Don't ever let anyone else hold the blueprints.